I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
And, with apologies to Barry Manilow, this week's movie is Mandy, week 3 of Nicolas Cage month.
What was intended to be good and bad Nicolas Cage.
Is there really a distinction?
I'm starting to wonder that more and more.
So Mandy is a film from 2018 that Rob is coming in fairly blind on.
Yep.
This was one of my selections. I'm just going to go straight to it. What did you know going in, and what did you make of it?
I had read the synopsis.
I almost think you shouldn't have read the synopsis.
Well, all I read was the enchanted lives of a couple in a secluded forest are brutally shattered by a nightmarish hippie cult and their demon biker henchmen, propelling a man into a spiraling, surreal rampage of vengeance. Which doesn't tell you a lot about this movie.
But also completely sums up this movie.
Yes. But it doesn't, so that's all I knew going into it. I had looked at one award it had won or something like that. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. I'm sure we'll look at it here in a minute. And that it was directed and written by Panos Casmatos.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Panos.
But that's all I knew going into it. I also knew that this was on our list as a bad Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
This is, of the 3 we've watched thus far, this is the one I respect the most.
Oh, really?
I'm not saying it's really good.
You know what? I agree with you. It is the most respectable. It is the most authorial in its vision. It is the best use, I think, of Nicolas Cage that we've yet encountered.
Well, we have commented in movies we've watched before that if you're going to go down a certain road, you should commit to it and just do it. This movie commits to its premise.
Yeah.
And follows its premise wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So, it was a very distinct film. So, I forget how I heard about it originally, but my sister, I think because she's a big Elijah Wood fan, and Elijah Wood was a producer of this film, became aware of it. And one of the times when I came up to Boise to visit, the plan was she hadn't seen it, but she had access to it. We were gonna watch it, but it didn't work out. And I wonder, what was the thought process there? It's a weird looking Nicolas Cage movie. My brother might like that. We'll watch that when he comes up. But that didn't work out. This film came out in 2018. I didn't see it till 2019, but I did see it in the theater.
Really?
Saw it at the Tower Theater. They had their summer movie series. I saw it with a moderately full theater, actually. And my initial impression was I was just kind of flummoxed by it. I was looking for... It's about something deeper, right? I was looking for that and trying to figure out what it was about. I frankly enjoyed it a lot more on second viewing because I realized how funny this movie is.
Yeah. I don't know that I caught a lot of humor, per se.
Mm-hmm. Because it's so intense and strange.
Yeah.
I think maybe, I was looking back at the review I wrote of this at the time, and I said, I think I'm going to have to see it again to figure out how I really think about it and what I really feel about it. Because you're just kind of overwhelmed by the intensity of it and the weirdness of it.
I almost think that not seeing it on the big screen for the first time seeing it might help with that, because it's not as... I could see how on a big screen this could be
the
kind of
sensory
overwhelming.
overload, yeah.
But on a little bit smaller screen, that intensity translates into... It just translates a little bit differently. Yeah. And so you're, I think, able to follow and process a few things a little bit more quickly. Just in terms of... looking at the plot and going, okay, is there something deeper to this? Or, they're moving on from this so fast it can't be much deeper.
It's kind of a pastiche of things. It's everything that a 1980s parents were afraid their kid would get into.
Uh-huh.
It's got biker gangs, it's got the occult, it's got Satanism, it's got drugs, it's got sci-fi fantasy cover art.
Yeah.
It's got all those things.
It's got anime.
It's got anime.
Yeah.
Which at the time I think was referred to as Japanimation. That's what I remember from the 80s. It's set in 1983. It is the second film by Panos Casmatos, who is the son of a Greek director and a Swedish sculptor who was born in Rome and raised in Canada. And his father is George P. Casmatos, who you would know as the director of Tombstone, which is very different than this movie. He also directed Rambo.
Panos has some sort of credit in Tombstone. I didn't catch what he has a credit for in that, but he has a credit in Tombstone.
But he also directed Rambo First Blood Part 2 and a film called Escape from Athenia, which is kind of a low-budget wannabe The Great Escape in the late 70s that even I had a really hard time getting through. The one other film that Panos had made before this was a film called Beyond the Black Rainbow, which I saw a week or two after I saw this film the first time.
Okay.
This is only the second time I've seen this. Because I was so struck by his visual style and sense, and I'm like, what's these larger themes that he's after? I wanted to find out more about what he was about. So I rented this 2010 Canadian production, which has a number of similarities to this, both stylistic and visuals. And both films are set in 1983. And both films are very critical of New Age religion, which is an interesting through line. And I'm kind of curious about why he has these strong feelings about hippie cults. And in the case of Beyond the Black Rainbow, a Scientology type organization. And in fact, the plot of that movie centers on a young woman with psychic powers who is being tested in a facility run by a Scientology type group. And it is very reminiscent of the 11 storyline from the series Stranger Things, though it came out 5 years before that show came out.
Yeah.
That movie is much more boring than this movie. It's very very slow. This film, Mandy, is 2 movies. Really, it divides about the halfway point.
Yeah, kind of, and it has kind of a weird chapter format in it that it doesn't maintain throughout. Like that's in the early part, and then
early on,
and then it's like they abandon that.
Yeah. So the first half is Nicolas Cage and his wife, Mandy, played by Andrea Riseborough, who I know as Stalin's daughter in The Death of Stalin.
Okay.
And she's a working actress. She shows up in a lot of things. They kind of plainified her here. They made her look kind of odd and plain, but she's a very pretty woman. They are living in a cabin out in the Oregon countryside. He's a logger. She is a painter, reads a lot of bad science fiction, and works part-time at a convenience store. And as she's walking to work, she is spotted by this cult in a van. The leader of the cult becomes enamored by her, and they track her down and abduct her at night, and they take Nicolas Cage out into the woods and tie him up. And he tries to have his way with her sexually, and drugs her for that purpose, but she laughs at him.
Yeah.
And he is
Jeremiah Sand, played by Linus Roach.
And he is a failed musician who somehow got a cult built around him and has some very devoted followers.
Yeah.
They'll do whatever crazy thing he comes up with doing.
And he's a big fan of the Carpenters.
He is a big fan of the Carpenters. That's one of the funny lines in this film. This film has got a number of funny lines. The one where he's trying to seduce her and says, "Do you like the Carpenters? I think that they are sensational."
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, anyway, she laughs at him, and that makes him very angry. And so they burn her to death in front of Nicolas Cage. And the second half is after he gets out of his restraints, goes into his home, watches a commercial for something called Cheddar Goblin.
Yeah, Cheddar Goblin, and it's
macaroni cheese.
A macaroni and cheese brand.
And it's a disturbing spoof of an 80s commercial. Yeah, the goblin coming out of the mounds of macaroni and cheese, and it's kind of Gremlins-esque.
And vomiting macaroni and cheese onto the kids' plates.
And he goes into this horrible yellow bathroom, and he screams, and he gets a bottle. He's walking around in his Tigers t-shirt and his tighty-whities, and he's drinking his bottle of liquor, and he's screaming. And then the next morning, he goes over to Bill Duke's trailer. Bill Duke is a regular in these kind of 80s action films. He was in Commando. He was in Predator. And there's some kind of backstory here that's not completely elucidated. It's like, I came for my stuff, and he came for some weapons. Bill Duke gives him some additional weapons. Tells him that this gang that he describes as this biker gang, the guy that made the LSD for him, like spiked the LSD, and they became like crazy evil.
Yeah.
or as Nicolas Cage describes them, weirdo hippie types, bikers and gnarly psychos, crazy evil. And he goes out to, it becomes a revenge movie, and he kills all 4 bikers and about a half dozen or so members of the gang, leaving to live the one lady who seemed like she wasn't entirely into it.
The most traditional hippie, the one who seems most innocent.
Kind of a captive of this group, and he's kind of like, okay, she can live, but I'm going to kill everybody else.
Yeah, I think that was Sister Lucy, played by Lene Pillay.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it just goes crazier and crazier. You get to the point where there is a chainsaw fight between Nicolas Cage and one of the cultists. And as I'm watching that scene, I'm like, you got a Nicolas Cage chainsaw fight, you have reached peak Nicolas Cage. It's like, you can't get more Nicolas Cage than a chainsaw fight.
Yeah.
So it is a surreal, intense film with a color scheme. Like the way this film was lit. The colors really
weird
pop.
Reds and blues.
Weird reds and blues.
Yeah.
The scene early on with the lake, it's like he is in a magic eye painting when he's on that boat.
And the face melding at a couple points with Jeremiah Sand, played by Linus Roach, and Mandy. The Jeremiah and Mandy face melds, those are kind of weird.
There's definitely some David Lynch in this.
I feel like this was either written, filmed, or intended to be watched on like an acid trip or LSD or something. Yeah.
I can see that. It's a trippy movie, man.
Yeah.
More thoughts?
Like I said, what I'm really struggling with right now is how am I going to rate this film? Because I respect this film, but is this a great film? Is this a film I'm going to widely recommend to people? Probably not. I'm not going to recommend it widely to a lot of people. There are people who would enjoy this, and I feel like we should be watching this in October.
Yeah.
Is this a great movie? No. But I respect it. Like I said, they commit to what they're trying to do, and they commit wholeheartedly to this, and they maintain it throughout. And it's just odd, and
it's such a particular movie.
Yeah,
like this is nobody else would make this movie. This is very much one man's vision, and it shows these really particular interests, and he's really committed to it. And
the weird tiger things, imagery throughout, and yeah, there's a lot of odd stuff about this. There's
the visuals go into the sci-fi visuals periodically.
Insects, the biker gang is weird.
Yeah,
almost kind of a little bit mechanized. Drinking blood, all of those. There's a lot of tropes here. Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff in this. But visually, and it's very dark. You at the very beginning of this film, you walked around your apartment turning off every light, and I'm glad you did. Because otherwise, there's a lot of stuff that would have gotten lost. This is the imagery and the way this is filmed. It's all dark. You've got to watch this in the dark to be able to catch the imagery of this. Yeah,
it is a film meant to be seen in the dark.
Yeah,
and it is. It's a dark film.
Yeah. What was the experience like this, seeing this in the theaters with a group of people?
Well, it was, as I said, it was kind of intense. And I didn't know what to make of it. Because sometimes you have to watch a film twice, really, to know what to make of it. Because the first time you're like, well, what is this? And now that I kind of know what it is, then I can kind of experience more because I'm not so much trying to figure it out.
How did it seem to be received by the other people in the theater? Because you said it was relatively crowded. It was
relatively crowded. I don't remember a lot of laughter. I think there was periodic laughter, but I was approaching it a much more kind of as a straight production.
Yeah.
And I think it's really kind of satirical, and some of the line deliveries are just really odd. Yeah, I think this is a satire of just 80s tropes. And of New Age religions, and of that Mandy's an interesting character because she's kind of quiet, and at the very end of the film,
she's really not in a lot of this film either.
No, she's hardly in it.
Yeah,
but she is obviously the motivating factor for basically everything that happens in it. But she's this quiet kind of nerdy girl, and that conversation her and Nicolas Cage have early on about your favorite planet.
Yeah.
And they're watching this crappy science fiction film, and Nicolas Cage is kind of watching it, and she, like, her eyes were like real intense. It was like she's really into this film that looked horrible.
Yeah.
So she's an interesting type that you don't see in film that much. But if you're kind of nerdy, kind of people like this, or you've encountered them over the years. I certainly have.
Yeah.
I like that it was set in 1983.
Yeah.
Some of the the period tech, and I think they should release the soundtrack to this film and give it the cover of of Jeremiah's album.
Yeah. Well, and did you write down the opening of the opening title sequence of this?
I know the gist of it, but I didn't write it down word for word. But it's a little poem about when I die. Put some headphones around my head and let me rock while I'm dead.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting way to start a film and kind of set the tone, I guess.
Yeah. At the Cannes Film Festival, Casmatos described it as a film about the death of his parents.
I do want to see Casmatos do more stuff because I think he's just so distinct.
Yeah.
But, he's only made 2 films, and he made his first one in 2010 and this one in 2018. I think whatever he makes his 3rd film, it should also be set in 1983, and it should be the 1983 trilogy.
Yeah. There's similarities between Jeremiah Sand and Charles Manson. I'm kind of glad I didn't know that going into it, but I can see it.
The moment you said that, I'm like, failed musician.
The Cheddar Goblin commercial was directed by Casper Kelly, who directed the Adult Swim short Too Many Cooks.
Have you seen Too Many Cooks? Did I show that to you?
No.
At some point. Maybe not tonight, but at some point you should see Too Many Cooks. So, what are your final summations? How would you rate this movie?
I'm kind of torn between a 5 and a 6 on this. Again, I respect how hard they committed to what they were doing, to a point that this gets bumped up a little bit in my estimation. But at the same time, it really isn't a great film.
And it is sometimes boring.
Yeah, there are a few boring parts.
It is slow. It's not in a hurry.
Yeah, and the film doesn't take itself seriously, so some of the goofs that occur in the film, like when he's forging his weapon, he's forging it out of like tin or something like that. But because the movie doesn't take itself seriously, it's hard to criticize that. Yeah, I'm really torn between 5 and 6 stars on the 10-star scale. Probably 1.5 on the 4-star scale. Wow. How would you rate this film?
When I originally rated it, and I even wrote in my review, I was like, I'm still not sure, but I had that being torn between the flaws of the film and the fact that the film stretches things longer than they need to be stretched. I think partially intentionally. And just being so enamored with the distinctiveness of it, I gave it 3 stars. But on second viewing, I would give it, I think, 2.5.
Yeah.
Which is usually where my guilty pleasures go. Yeah. And I would give it 6 on the 10-star scale. Yeah. There are just
I can see this being described as a guilty pleasure.
Yeah. This is cult movie written all over it, besides the fact that, it's about a cult. It's also a cult movie in the wider sense.
I'm genuinely surprised that this hasn't come up in one of our October horror movie months, and I might recommend this to some people this October.
Yeah, it's really different. It's kind of hard to.
I can't think of anything to compare it to. I can't think of anything like it. Melinda asked me before I came over tonight. She goes, "So is this some sort of Wicker Man homage?" Which I haven't seen Wicker Man.
Well, you've seen
I saw the
Wicker Man, but not the Nicolas Cage one.
But I don't think it is. No, it's its own thing.
Yeah, it is its own thing. Really, the closest thing that I can think of to it is Twin Peaks. In part with the setting and the mood, and the bad guy in this actually kind of looks like Bob, who's a bad guy in that. And I think that's kind of intentional. Reading about it had also been compared to Stanley Kubrick.
Okay.
So he's gotten a lot of stylistic kudos, Cosmos has. But again, so early in his career, having such, just 2 films, I think there's a lot of promise there. But I'd like to see it mature and take more form. But this is certainly a very interesting film.
Yeah. Do you know anything about how this did in the box office?
Not well. It cost about $6 million to make, and I want to say it made around $1.5 million.
I was curious if you knew, but because I hadn't looked at that. Yeah, like you said, estimated budget is $6 million. Its opening weekend domestically was $225,000. Its U.S. gross was $1.2 million, with a worldwide gross of $1.5 million.
So that might make it kind of harder for him to make more films if they're making this guy, losing that much money. But I think somebody's eventually going to give him another paycheck.
Yeah, and this was put together by a Heinz 57 of production.
Yeah, there's so many.
Yeah, and so I'm sure that at some point he'll piece together another group of productions.
Yeah.
And
I noticed that one of them was called XYZ Productions, which I'm pretty sure is a front for some kind of French scam.
Yeah.
History nerd joke.
Yeah. What was so Elijah Wood was credited as a producer. Mm-hmm. Do you know how involved he was?
I don't know, but he's had a thing in recent years, especially for horror films. He started in a number of them, and I guess he produces them.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I've never seen anything like this. Who would you recommend this to, or would you recommend this to anyone, and under what circumstances?
That's a good question.
I think this works in any... like if someone's doing a horror film theme.
Anybody that likes really weird, kind of out there, different filmmaking, somebody with particular interest in the 80s or science fiction fantasy. So I can see myself, not that I know people that do this, but recommending this to people who play Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. Because it's kind of a Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Fun. Well, anything else to add on this movie?
No, there's, it's a weird one. Know that going in, or don't know anything going in. I mean, it's going to be a trip either way.
Yeah. Well, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. Oh, we forgot Vicious Snowflake.
Vicious Snowflake. That was my favorite shirt. You ripped my shirt. It's all on you, Buster. I like to call that the cherry on top.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Eric Estrada.
Eric Estrada who?
Eric Estrada from Chips.
They went heavy on the 80s early on. They wronged you. Why they gotta be like that?